When Joseph and Emma Smith arrived in what would become Nauvoo, May of 1839, part of the structure you see behind me was already standing. The log section was already here. It's probably built in 1823 by Captain James White. The Smiths buy it from his son, Hugh White. There's 2 rooms, one down, one up. Remember, no additions yet. In those 2 rooms, you had Joseph and Emma and 4 and sometimes 5 children and people who would pay to board with them. By the fall of 1839, Joseph is headed to Washington, D.C. to ask for help from U.S. President Martin Van Buren after being driven from Missouri. While Joseph is gone, malaria is raging in Nauvoo. Emma has taken in as many as 12 people, trying to nurse them back to health. It's so crowded in those 2 rooms, she had to move her family into a tent in the yard here. The family desperately needed more space. They get it in 1840. The keeping room addition goes on. You see it pushing off to the north, the white-sided addition. And then within a few years, it seems, they've added 4 more rooms, 2 down, 2 up, to the white-sided rooms to my right. Those are currently, though, furnished and interpreted as they might have looked when Joseph Smith III is living here with his wife, Emmeline, also known as Emma Smith. He's elected Justice of the Peace. They have a growing family. So they are here from 1858 to 1866 when they removed to Plano, Illinois. Instead. So we've now moved into the oldest part of the house. Again, what the Smiths would have moved into in 1839. 1 room down, stairs behind a door in a corner, 1 room up. Behind me and to the right, you see a walking stick used by Emma Smith later in life. Over the mantel in this room is a musket, one of the type of weapons used by the Nauvoo Legion. The Legion was part of the Illinois State Militia, but in some ways a little different. It was very, very large. These people were passionate about their service in the Legion. So there's probably maybe 3,000 men participating at a time when the U.S. Standing Army had maybe only 8,000 men. It was a defensive force, but for non-members who visited Nauvoo, they might not easily recognize that and sometimes were terrified by the Legion. A non-member U.S. artillery officer visited on a day when the Legion was practicing or parading, and he ends up writing a letter describing what he saw. He said that it's true, the Mormons are peaceable now, but they are like a snowball rolling down an inclined plane that would soon become an avalanche. It's true, he said they're peaceable now, but they're like a lion asleep. Be careful, don't wake them. And he repeatedly called us a warlike people. That's not a description I recognize, but our attempts to defend and protect were being perceived as an offensive threat. I'm in the 1842 or so addition to the home, 2 rooms down, 2 rooms up. Well, we currently furnish and interpret these as they might have looked in 1858 to 1866 when Joseph Smith III and his growing family are here. He is elected Justice of the Peace in Nauvoo, starts serving in 1858. He then joins with the reorganization in 1860, and the locals were not amused. They began passing resolutions township by township forbidding Joseph Smith III from preaching or praying in those places. That made Joseph III angry, and he vowed to stay right here and do as he pleased for 5 years, which he did. But in that pretty tense environment, he has to run for re-election. He knows he's in trouble. He wins in what he calls a landslide. Apparently, that's not very many votes in Nauvoo politics, but here's why he thought he won. He said almost everybody living in Nauvoo by the early 1860s is an immigrant. And so Joseph III believed that they were being taken advantage of because of their lack of familiarity with our language and customs. So he would often do their legal work for free. And as a way of saying thank you, they turn out en masse and vote for him, despite what their religious and political and business leaders are telling them to do. We're now in the 1840 edition of the Homestead. The Smith family called this the keeping room, short for housekeeping. You would cook here in the winter months, you'd eat here, entertain here. You'd cook in the summer months in a summer kitchen just out to the right, a reconstruction on that one. That's where Joseph Smith Sr. and Lucy Mack Smith lived when they first arrived. When finished, this room was probably the biggest room in Nauvoo because it's built so very early, which means this becomes the center of community life until the red brick store opens in 1842. I'm going to tell you the story here of an event that took place in this room. I think it's probably the happiest day of Joseph's life in 1840s Nauvoo. To get there, though, I need to back up to Missouri, spring of 1842. Governor Boggs, former Governor Boggs, is shot while sitting in his home in Independence. Fairly quickly, the Missourians start saying Porter Rockwell, a Latter-day Saint, did it, and Joseph Smith put him up to it, they said. So they start sending sheriffs over here to Nauvoo to arrest and extradite Joseph, take him back to Missouri to face charges. He had pretty good reason to think he's not going to get a fair hearing there. He decides he's not going back, which means he builds hiding places into his homes. One of them was just outside this west window underground. There are stairs there leading into the cellar under our feet. They built a hidden hinge into those wooden steps, so you could lift part of them up, drop underneath, close the steps, pushing off to the west underground a little brick vaulted room, just big enough for 2 men and some food and some water. One of Joseph's hiding places he had to use on several occasions. Imagine, though, how frustrating that would have been. Joseph spent about 80 days in hiding summer and fall of 1842. Not always here, he's kind of bouncing around, but imagine running a city and a church under those conditions. Finally, out of frustration, he goes to Springfield, Illinois, turns himself into a federal judge for an extradition hearing. Judge Pope, P-O-P-E is his name, Joseph's attorney, Justin Butterfield. So I'll paraphrase Butterfield's opening statements in defense of the prophet Joseph Smith. I never dreamed, he said, that I'd be standing in front of the Pope, get it, Judge Pope, defending the prophet of the Lord in the presence of holy apostles, some of the 12 were there, surrounded by beautiful angels, a reference to the fact that there were ladies on the bench with the judge, including, it seems, Mary Todd Lincoln, Abraham's new bride. If there's such a thing as celebrity in the 1840s, it's not the Lincolns, not yet. It's Joseph, and people had turned out from all over to witness this hearing. Butterfield, not just funny but talented, got Joseph released. On the way home, church leaders wrote a song called the Mormon Jubilee, 15 verses long. They sing it at every stop on the way back, praising Governor Ford and Judge Pope and anybody else they could think of. They get home, they rest for a week. The 12 call for a day to be set aside in fasting and prayers of thanksgiving. So imagine the whole city shut down for these fast meetings, one of them in this room. And then on the next day, here, Joseph and Emma host 50 of their closest friends, plus the children, for a celebratory feast. So 75 people total. Joseph and Emma wait on the tables themselves. They sing all 15 verses of the Mormon Jubilee. Eliza R. Snow, though, apparently thought that 15 verses didn't really capture the joy in their hearts. She wrote another 16 verses. They sing those as well. Somewhere in the midst of that celebration, Joseph announced it wasn't only a jubilee for his safe return, it was also his 15th wedding anniversary. It was probably only Emma who noticed that it was really 16 years.